Look closely at any crowd, and human hair seems almost endlessly varied. Platinum blonde, copper red, chestnut brown, jet black. But remove hair dye, studio lighting, and fashion from the picture. Across most of the planet, natural hair falls into one dominant range, dark brown to black. That is the ancient pattern. Blonde and red hair are not the rule. They are rare biological experiments. So the real mystery is not why dark hair exists. It is why evolution allowed lighter colors to appear, spread, and survive at all. The answer is hidden inside a microscopic pigment factory beneath your skin, in ancient migrations across continents, and in genetic switches that can alter appearance with surprisingly small changes. Before we follow the evidence, subscribe to Wonder Thread Labs for more cinematic journeys into the science hiding inside ordinary life. The first clue is strange enough on its own. The hair you can touch is no longer alive. The visible shaft contains no nerves, no blood supply, and no living cells. It is built mainly from tightly packed keratin, the same durable family of proteins found in your nails. Once a section of hair emerges from the scalp, it cannot decide to become darker, lighter, or redder. Its color was assigned earlier, deep inside the follicle. At the base of that follicle, living cells are building a new hair fiber. Nearby are specialized pigment-producing cells called melanocytes. They manufacture pigment inside tiny packages called melanosomes, then transfer those packages into the developing hair cells. As the hair hardens and rises through the skin, the pigment becomes trapped inside it. And nature creates nearly the entire human hair palette using only two broad families of pigment. Eumelanin produces black and brown tones. Pheomelanin produces red and yellow tones. Black hair contains abundant dark eumelanin. Brown hair generally contains less, or distributes it differently. Blonde hair contains much less total melanin. Red hair contains relatively more pheomelanin and less eumelanin. There is no natural blue pigment inside blue-black hair, and no gold paint inside blonde strands. What we see comes from pigment quantity, pigment type, microscopic structure, and the way light scatters through the fiber. This explains how hair receives color, but it does not explain why humans ended up with different settings. For that, we have to travel backward. Modern humans originated in Africa, where early populations lived under intense sunlight and high ultraviolet exposure. Dark, eumelanin-rich skin was the ancestral condition, and dark hair is also considered the ancestral and globally dominant hair state. But the story is more complicated than many simple explanations suggest. Dark skin clearly evolved under strong environmental pressure because exposed skin had to manage ultraviolet radiation. Hair color does not follow the same clean geographic pattern. Hair itself can reduce solar heat reaching the scalp, and tightly curled hair appears especially effective at creating shade above the head. But scientists do not have equally strong evidence that black hair color by itself was selected as an ultraviolet shield in the same way dark skin was. That distinction matters. It means hair color was probably shaped by several forces acting together. When groups of humans moved into new regions, they carried only part of the genetic diversity of the populations they left behind. Small populations passed through bottlenecks. Chance became powerful. A rare pigment variant could disappear, or become common simply because a few people carrying it had many descendants. This is genetic drift, evolution without a plan. At the same time, unusual colors may no longer have been strongly removed by natural selection. And once a visible trait became rare, social preference may also have influenced how often it was passed on. Scientists have proposed sexual selection as part of the story, especially in Europe, but there is no single proven explanation for every blonde or red-haired population. Evolution rarely leaves a signed confession. It leaves clues. And blonde hair provides one of the best. In Northern Europe, blonde hair is not controlled by one simple blonde gene. Large genetic studies have linked it to hundreds of variants. Some influence pigment production. Others affect the machinery that builds, transports, or regulates melanin. One well-studied variant sits in a regulatory region controlling KITLG, a gene active in developing hair follicles. A tiny change in this genetic control panel reduces pigment activity in the hair without simply switching pigmentation off everywhere else. But Europe is only half of the mystery. Thousands of miles away, in the Solomon Islands, some indigenous Melanesian people have naturally blonde hair alongside deeply pigmented skin. For years, outsiders assumed the trait must have arrived through recent European ancestry. The DNA told a different story. Researchers found a variant in a gene called TYRP1 that is common in the Solomon Islands, but rare or absent in most populations elsewhere. It accounts for a large share of blonde hair variation there and arose independently from the major European pathways. Two distant populations reached a similar visible result through different genetic routes. Nature did not copy one recipe. It discovered blonde hair more than once. Red hair reveals a different kind of switch. A major player is a receptor called MC1R, located on melanocytes. When this signaling system works in one direction, the cell produces more dark eumelanin. Certain inherited variants reduce that signal, shifting pigment production toward pheomelanin. The result can be copper, auburn, or vivid red hair, often accompanied by fairer skin and freckles. But even this is not a perfect one-gene equation. MC1R is the strongest known contributor to red hair, yet other genes modify the result. Some people carry relevant variants without having red hair. Hair color is not a set of 4 boxes. It is a spectrum produced by overlapping biological controls. And those controls do not always agree across the same body. A person can have dark brown scalp hair and a beard that flashes copper red in sunlight. This is not a mistake in the DNA. Scalp follicles and beard follicles live in different biological neighborhoods. They respond differently to local signals, hormones, growth cycles, and pigment-regulating genes. Each follicle is a tiny, semi-independent organ. So the pigment recipe used above the forehead does not have to match the recipe used on the chin. The same regional independence helps explain why hair can gray unevenly. One temple may turn silver years before the other. A beard may whiten while the scalp remains dark. And gray hair is more fascinating than simple fading. An existing strand does not usually lose its pigment and turn white from the outside. Instead, a new strand grows with less pigment than the one before it. Inside the follicle are melanocyte stem cells that help replenish pigment-producing cells during new growth cycles. As we age, this system becomes less reliable. Some stem cells are depleted. Others survive but become trapped in the wrong region of the follicle, unable to reach the place where they must mature and produce pigment. The factory remains, but its workers can no longer reach the production floor. The new hair emerges with little or no melanin. Light scatters through the nearly transparent keratin structure, making strands appear gray, silver, or white. This helps explain why graying can advance in patches and why two neighboring hairs can have completely different colors. Each follicle has its own history. So why do humans have different hair colors? Because hair color is not one trait controlled by one gene for one purpose. It is a record of pigment chemistry, follicle biology, ancient migrations, population bottlenecks, random mutations, and perhaps human preference. Dark hair preserves the most widespread ancestral pattern. Blonde hair shows that similar appearances can evolve through separate genetic pathways. Red hair reveals how a molecular switch can redirect pigment production. A mismatched beard proves that neighboring follicles can follow different instructions. And gray hair shows what happens when the pigment system changes with time. Long before hair became fashion, identity, or self-expression, it was already a biological archive. Every strand began as a living construction project beneath the skin. Every shade carries instructions inherited across generations. Evolution does not work toward a perfect final design. It preserves what succeeds, tolerates what causes little harm, and sometimes allows chance to create something entirely new. Your hair is not merely colored, it is history, growing one strand at a time.